Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here today. It's been such a great day, and I can't wait to share the stage with everybody that we have planned. So please join me in welcoming Raju Narisetti, who is the Global Publishing Director of McKinsey Co., Anthony Nakache, Managing Director of Google, Mena, and Nart, Bouran, our very own CEO at IMI Holding. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel quite far away from everybody. Okay, so when I was thinking about this topic and Mena mentioned it, I think there's something that we all have in common in this world, in this era, and that's fighting to keep the attention of audiences, which are constantly distracted. And in the future of information and the ways we connect, it is growing, and I think that's something that I would like to talk to you all today. So, how do organizations stay above the noise? Nart, I wanted to speak to you first. What tactics do you think are important to remain relevant to our audience?
Okay. Is this working?
I hope so.
I hope so. I think so. Well, thank you very much. But if I may, before I answer that question, I just want to say we at IMI are extremely proud of what the National has been able to achieve over the last 15 years. We are very proud of Mena and the team, and we thank her for the event and also for keeping us through most of the time. So thank you very much. Just to answer that question, maybe I'm a little bit old school, that I'm going to show my age and how long I've been in this business, but it's really the tactics that are being used at the moment. It all depends on the behavior of the users and the audiences, and that's what we're focusing on. I don't think we all remember the power of the thumb, where we used to switch the remote control and the radio dial and flip pages. Funny enough, the thumb is still the most important tool. But now we're going up and down, scrolling, and picking everything with our right hand. And if it does, and now we're even too lazy to use our left hand to start typing. So everything has to happen with your right hand, or your left. If you're a lefty, we're using your thumb. So those are really some of the things that we know as a fact with all our experience in media. Being a TV person as well. The way we've with all the screen architecture and everything that we've done in the past, if you look at the ticker that's there on the TV now, I can guarantee you, if you're interested in any sort of type of news, you probably have seen it or heard it on your social media feed or your push notification, and you're not waiting for that ticker to tell you what's going on. So everything has changed, and everything has become somehow a little bit more difficult sometimes to attract more and more of the audience. However, I think they really fall into two main buckets. One, the tactics that are related to the content, and the tactics that are related to the platforms and the technology that we're using at the moment. And I think when it comes to the content, understanding our audience and understanding what exactly that they're looking for, it's now a two-way conversation, and no longer a linear conversation with an audience where you're just telling them what you think. Now it's a two-way conversation, and understanding the audience is one of the most important things. The second thing is, and we always say, the high quality content, and I think the high quality content is always going to be the most important thing. Now these days, with the blurred lines between misinformation and sometimes truth is only what you see in your own eyes, make things a little bit more difficult. But for sure, the content and the quality of content is always going to be the most important thing. And the way you tell your story, the way you engage, the way what tools you're using are also very important in terms of how you're displaying your content. When it comes to the platform, I think we're at a stage now where multi-channel. We need to embrace that, where you're creating content and you have to think of it, which content is going to go on which platform, in which format. And thinking of your own owned and operated platforms as the place where everybody's going to go, I think it's a little bit naive. And you need to make sure that the content is done, edited, and created in a way that can go onto multi-platforms and multi-channels. You know, the whole thing about data-driven is extremely important, and I think that's another tactic that we must use in terms of how we actually use the data to create the content. Lastly, new technologies, which I think is probably the most scary part for anyone in a media business. And that is, previously you would be able to say, let's see how that platform or that technology is performing, and then we can decide whether we want to take part. I think these days you have to take the risk. You have to take the risk of joining the bandwagon of whatever that's being out there in terms of technology in order to be the first. It's okay to be the first and successful, and you have to accept that sometimes you'll be the first and maybe not very successful. But you know, being able to embrace the technology and embrace different platforms is something that is now becoming a must forever. You can't hold back and see what everybody else is doing. You have to be the first. You have to be the one who's taken that chance. Sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't, but you have to accept that.
Yeah, I know it's a big challenge in the industry, and I know from working in other places, we've all faced it. I quite like the idea of getting rid of the ticker or completely. You can try telling Sky News that. I'm going to go to Raju next. So you advise people all the time in the industry. How do you advise people to stand out?
Yeah, before I answer, I also want to thank Mena and the national team for having us here. Only the national can pull off a counter-programming against a very important Arab League meeting today and have all of you here than watching what's happening there. So thanks to the audience. Enas, I think for us, the challenge is even more complicated because McKinsey Publishing or any B2B publishing is not in the news business. So we don't have the luxury of using news as a way to engage audiences. But it does go back to a fundamental way to think about this, right? Which is that none of us are really competing against each other in that sense. The one thing we're all competing for is the single non-renewable resource our audience has, which is their time, right? If you can get 10 more minutes of that, you've kind of won the battle, because what you do with those 10 minutes is up to you. So if you think that way, then for us at McKinsey Publishing, it begins with this notion that everybody has good ideas. Everybody now has similar good content. So good content, I think, has become table stakes. What is more important for us is like, is that content actionable? So we would like to think of everything we do as insights to impact. So if you focus on being able to provide that roadmap where a CEO is reading something from us and saying, well, it's not exactly talking about my situation, I'm seeing things here that I can actually use to solve my problem. So we've moved past this notion that you just have to have great ideas. I think that's given now. So focusing on what can you do with those ideas has been a good way for us to kind of break through the clutter of everybody having good ideas and having good content. The second piece, and Nart referred to it as well, which is if you assume that everybody has the same content, more or less. Occasionally you may have a breaking news, but the advantage of an exclusive piece of news is now minutes because everybody else can catch up very quickly with you. The differentiator, I think, is that creating an experience layer on top of the content layer. By that I mean, if you're reading, take the Arab League story, for example. If you're reading about it, everybody has the same news because it's happening in one Jeddah and everybody is following it. But the experience of consuming that at the national can be very different than consuming it somewhere else, because you've created multimedia, you have a columnist doing a perspective, you have the straight news. All of that adds up to creating an experience that only the national can do in a differentiated way. And if you can layer that experience and make that unique, then I think you can build loyalty and have engagement, so that the next time somebody is thinking about following an event, they could say, the last time I did this at the national was more interesting and more engaging. Let me start there. So I think thinking of it as having a content layer that is great, but that's table stakes. And then having a very unique experience layer, often multimedia, I think is the way to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, even from my short amount of time at the National, I've just realized how important our voices in this region and giving that extra perspective, which puts us above other publications. Anthony, what challenges do you think are common in keeping those attentions? I'm sure you have a lot of data going through Google.
So we're not a publisher, so we're looking at things in a different way, obviously. And the first thing is just to recognize that internet has brought a lot of good things, okay? But it also has challenges, like any other technology. We like to think about it as this is the mirror, like the online world is a mirror of all the societal changes that you see offline. So with the proliferation of the platforms, of the tech platforms, it made access to information a lot easier, no doubt, which is probably a good thing, right? But when it comes to attention, I like to break it down and probably looking at two different things, using like the push and the pull analogy. So consumers today, they want more options. They want more content. So they are pushing to actually be on more platforms, to actually get access to more tools and services that will actually serve their needs, whether it's consuming news, like streaming videos, getting entertained. So here we're really about the consumer needs are driving the supply platform. That's one thing, that's the push. On the other side, at the same time, the consumers are pulled in many different directions from many different sources of information, and that can be overwhelming and potentially dangerous. We're talking about fake news, disinformation, spam, and a lot of other things. So tech platforms have a responsibility in this world, in responsibility towards their users of the platform, making sure that their well-being and their mental health is respected. And it's especially true when it comes to kids and young children who are actually now growing up on devices. So all tech platforms need to play a role. At Google, we look at it in different ways. So, for instance, on YouTube, you can set reminders to take a break. So you're not going to consume too much. You have that reminder. By default, as well, the notification, all the vibrations and the sounds and everything will be turned off between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., just to make sure that you're not interrupted during your night. Talking about kids, we also have an app called Family Link that really help parents manage the screen time of their kids, where they are spending their time, how much of their time they are spending. And it's also very important that, obviously, we think about how we're going to surface authoritative content and making sure that the quality of the content from reputable publishers is actually surfaced online. But we can't do that on our own. It's a collective effort. We need to understand where the attention is spent and work on media literacy, like educating people, starting with kids, as I said, but like families, parents, educators, civic society, everyone has a role to play.
I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is this information which we're sharing is also going cross-generation, which is probably one of the first times we've seen it. Data is gold, and we mention it all the time in the industry. I'm going to come back to you, Anthony, because Google is seen as the kind of hub of searchable data. I was at Google recently, and they said that their mission is to make all of the world's information searchable, which is an incredible mission statement to have. What has it taught you personally with working with so much knowledge?
So organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible and useful for everyone is our mission, and has been our mission for 25 years. So since the very beginning of Google. And it's fascinating, actually, because it's a mission that's still true today. Like, that's something that we are working on, and that personally keeps me extremely motivated. So we have a lot of information. We see a lot of it through search, and it's teaching us a couple of things. First of all, it matters. It's important. Like, people come to Google, look for information about things that they really care about. They really matter. So if you look at the UAE, for instance, during the COVID period, 90% of people in the UAE were coming to Google search to actually find the latest information from the health authorities. during that same period of time, 85% of people went to search to actually learn a new skills. So they come to Google because they're looking for information that really matters. So it's important, it matters is the first thing. The second thing is that it's a very hard problem. There is a lot of data out there, and whether it's technically or organizationally, it's difficult. But it's also very difficult because the expectations keep changing, and I think it's probably something that's actually very important for publishers to take into consideration. What we see, we have billions of queries every day on our platform. 15% of them are new. Every single day, we're talking about dozens, hundreds of millions of queries are new. We've never seen them, but we still need to actually provide an answer. So it's a never ending process for us, and it's a hard problem to solve. That amount of information and knowledge also gives us great power to bring new, amazing experiences. So we are moving away from just like giving like just a response and trying to actually bring more value to the user. For instance, a feature that you have on search is about see. So if you go and type how tall is Burj Khalifa, you will get how high it is, but you also get a panel on the right side that will give you more information, linking to a website that will give you more insight, but also like the platform that gives you access to the tickets to actually go and visit it, for instance. So it gives you like more power to actually deliver better experiences. But we also realize that it has to come with a very responsible approach. People come to Google because, as we said, they come to find information that matters to them, and they trust us to deliver the right information. So we need to make sure that the information is correct, that is providing value to them, that the data that we're collecting to actually deliver these experiences is done like in a privacy-safe way and is secure. There is also a lot of responsibility that comes with it.
There's a lot of responsibility. I'm actually going to come to Nart now. I know we use data all the time in journalism to know what we should be talking about and what people are generally interested in. How much do you think we should allow data to guide our industry?
I don't think it's up to us, to actually, whether we decide to allow or not to allow. You don't have much of a choice. You have to look at the data. You have to look at what's going on. Data gives you the insights into what is going on with your audience. But I think from a publisher, from a media point of view, where we came and where we are now has really come a long way. So previously, it used to be everything was done over the phone. You'd call, you'd see what the ratings are, circulation of newspapers, and so on. So this is the old way of we used to do it, which was extremely inaccurate, and you can't build any content or any strategy according to that most of the time. Now we're down to the nuance of data. We know who, where, why, who they are, their age, their sex. All that kind of data is extremely important for you to be able to devise your content. But it's also about what content is working, what is not, how you pivot, how you change. And I think that kind of data is extremely important for everyone in media, or in news, at least in these days. However, I think the benefit of data, which helps us to create better content, doesn't necessarily mean that it's giving us the edge from a commercial or from a revenue perspective. So we are able to change our content accordingly, but I think the people who are benefiting mostly from the data are the data people who actually hold that data. So I think it's a little bit of unfairness for the people who are creating the content. So you have a lot of people who are creating content, but they're not necessarily benefiting from the data that's generated by that content. So I think that's something that needs to happen, needs to change. I don't know how. There are a lot of countries who are thinking about how they're going to do this by striking deals between media organizations and big tech. That's one way of looking at it. But usually, the way that things happen, they modify things that will work out for everyone. But at the moment, the use of data is great to create content, improve content, but it's not helping us much with monetizing. Certainly not at the level where we spend in terms of news organizations, and that's the imbalance in the system at the moment.
Yeah, so there are news organizations which are now collecting data. Raju, would you see collecting data as actually probably one of the most valuable commodities that we could be doing?
I have a yes, but answer. I think our industry has been pretty terrible at this because journalism and the way news organizations are run grew out of what I call the tummy compass, right? Which is the gut feel. A bunch of editors walk into a room at 11 or 2 or 4 and decide what the world should read tomorrow on the front page. It never really used any data. And we seeded all of that to the Googles and the Facebooks and all of them. And they came in without any of these preconceived notions and built their businesses on just understanding data. So the fact that in 2023 we're asking about this is itself a huge problem because that battle is pretty much over. As Nart was saying, we don't have the kind and scale of data to actually fight on those terms. But at the same time, we have to separate out what we mean by data. I think if you're talking about third-party data, we just don't have a chance against the Googles of the world. Just the sheer numbers and the sheer users give them that edge. And their attitude towards data has given them that edge for a couple of decades almost. What we have is an opportunity to still focus on collecting first-party data because there is still a fair amount of trust in a brand like the National or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post where I used to work before. And the ability to collect that data, I think, still gives us a chance. So separating out what is first-party data that we own from our readers versus supplementing that with third-party, I think is going to make a difference. But we're also doing this at a time when GDPR is very much a factor. Being able to ask and get data is a real challenge. And again, most of us have not made a convincing case to our audiences why they should give us data. We scrape a lot, we collect a lot. I mean, newspapers are the biggest culprits. You go to one of their websites, there'll be like 40 cookies, like really doing all sorts of shady stuff without explaining it. And they're the ones who are complaining about the Googles of the world all the time, right, in their editorial pages. So we have to be much more direct about creating a privacy economy, being able to talk to our audiences, saying, here is why we collect data, because if we do that, we can help personalize things for you. At McKinsey, if you use our app, we tell you that it allows us to then say, if you're interested in agriculture, then we make that your homepage, because we know that's what you're reading, and we know that because you've given us data. The other aspect of it is I don't think we invest enough as an industry in collecting data, but there are ways to do this without thinking about big data, right? I mean, one of the best ways to collect data for our industry is through newsletters. If you create them and if there's a willingness for people to sign up, oftentimes they give you an email, which is usually a permanent email. I mean, at McKinsey, we have 2 million active subscribers to about 45 different emails. And most of them subscribe to about 5 different emails. But they often keep them. They change jobs, and they usually kind of keep the same email because they give us the Gmail. So the ability to ask them questions, get more data is much, and that's all first-party data. The other thing I think news organizations don't do is to create panels to do surveys, where you can actually create a panel and get a bunch of data. Again, at McKinsey, we have a 30,000 CEO, C-suite panel globally. It gives us a lot of data, not in the sense of their emails and who they are, but when the pandemic happened, when we were all wondering about supply chain, we could go to these 30,000 people and say, how are you dealing with it? So that created a lot of first-party data for McKinsey. So I think there are ways news organizations can do this rather than trying to compete against the Googles and the Facebooks, because that battle is over.
Yeah, Anthony.
So can I respond to that? Because I'm here, so I'm now leading like the Google in the region, but I've spent a lot of time working with publishers in my previous Google life. And so I heard the argument a lot about like who has the data, like Google has the data, we as publishers don't have the data. We're coming from different places, and I don't think the question is about like who has the data, who should have the data. For me, it's very much about like how we work together to actually have a thriving news ecosystem. Because we as Google like want an open web with publishers that are very successful, as much as publishers obviously want to be successful. And there's a lot when I talk about working together that we do. And if not, we should not do. But I know, for instance, with the National, we actually have an extremely good collaboration, and we should celebrate that. But first of all, like we drive a lot of traffic to publishers. Like every month, these are billions of visitors that go from Google News or Google Search to the websites of the different publishers. Each click, basically, is an opportunity for publishers to monetize. The second thing is we actually work with publishers, making our advertising solutions available to them so that they can actually benefit from the system we've built. And we work on a rev share model. Every single case, the publisher makes more money on the click on the ad than we do. And in some cases, it is up to 90% of the price of the ad that is shared with the publisher. And the third thing, which for me is super important as well, is the innovation and the training that we're working with publishers. Like the National, again, is benefited from a grant of the Google News Initiative on a very nice project to transform text into audio, which is going to be
so much,
really good. But it's also training, and you've been to a training recently. So this is where we can actually bring, because yes, we have a good experience of digital, of how to engage audience, how to understand audiences, and so on. And there's a lot we can share on top of like tools that we are sharing with publishers.
No, there's definitely a symbiotic relationship.
So can I just jump in? I think, and I don't want Anthony to become the token big tech that we have to. This is not about Google, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea. It's not just about Google, but I think sharing the data and working together to improve a service for the audiences is very important. And this is what we're talking about. What I mean in terms of sharing the revenue, which is by the time it gets to something which we get 90%, it's already been cut 5 or 6 times on the top. And by the time it gets to the publishers, we are talking about really dollars, hundreds of dollars, let alone thousands of millions and so on. So I think it's not about what we do with the data in terms of sharing and improving. It's about fairness in distribution of revenues that we know a lot of companies are making billions and billions of dollars, and we are creating the content. And we are actually spending the money on creating the content. So we are the ones who are actually creating that content. And again, this is not about Google. I don't want this to be misunderstood. But that how that is divided by the time you cut the pie into a small share, and you say, well, you're getting 90% of $100. Oh, thank you very much. That's where I think it's being a little bit unfair. So the industry needs to modify itself, and maybe the war is already lost, and we need to find different ways of working together and creating, increasing, making the pie bigger, or thinking of it in a different way. What it does for publishers is it puts tremendous amount of pressure to constantly reduce cost, reduce your operating model, find better ways of doing things, which is good, which is not a bad thing. But I think the model of going from TV advertising, where the big companies flourished for many, many years, and also squandered a lot of the revenue in order not to spend and invest in these technologies that other people came and did, is something that they are guilty of. But it hasn't. This is not a zero-sum game where it dropped from one side and increased from the other. There's sort of a big chunk of money that got lost somewhere in the middle that nobody got. Well, we know who got it, but it's not us.
Yeah, and also most governments are starting to realize that, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of this argument you're in, you saw it in Australia, you're now seeing it in Canada, it's going to happen in Kenya, Indonesia, India. I don't know if it's happening here, where government regulators are saying, this is an unequal playing field, so we need to kind of jump in and regulate and decide who needs to pay how much to who, which is not the ideal solution, actually, right? We would ideally want this to be a...
It's forcing a solution. It's not a real solution.
Conversation between the news industry and the tech platforms. But I think other players are starting to kind of weigh in on this, and that's going to drive country by country how this is going to play out.
Yeah, it's going to be something that we're all probably going to witness soon in the industry. I do see it as a symbiotic relationship, though, still, because we want to create good content as journalists. Google wants good content on their platform, and I think there should be some sort of middle ground, hopefully, that we'll find, maybe after this conversation.
But Enas, if I may just, I think we want good content, but we want like thriving publishers as well. This is important, and I know that. I mean, we could have I don't know if we have 2 or 3 hours, Mena.
I don't think
but
so.
we could have a much longer conversations, and probably we should. We need successful publishers. This is important for the open web. This is important for all actually our mission. So we want that. Now we're coming from different perspectives. There might have been cases where we were not understanding each other really well. I really want to. I want to believe that also, like when we say Google and big tech all in the same sentence, like that Google is looking at things in a very different way. And again, the examples that I've shared about how much we care about publishers and everything we do, like make a difference. But yeah, we could have a longer conversation about that.
Yeah, well, moving on to the rise of social media, which is something I know when I began my career was kind of not really taken very seriously, and suddenly it's become this dominant force in the news and in loads of other industries that you never imagined social media to become such a crucial part in. Do you still think, Raju, that social media will play a huge part in the future, or do you see that trend changing?
I think it continues to play a huge part depending on how we define social media. But if you're talking about technologies and brands and platforms that make things go viral much better at a global scale, clearly that's happening and will continue to happen, right? Whether people of a certain generation think Facebook is for our parents and we don't use them, but then there's TikTok and there's other things, right? So in that sense, there'll always be new ways to kind of engage, especially younger audiences, and give them ways to share. And I think the upside and the downside was visible this past week when Vice Media filed for bankruptcy, right? The upside was Vice rose on social, created amazing interactions with young people, created a lot of interesting content, but then 100% relied on these third parties to kind of engage audiences, which left them with no real loyalty of their own. And when these platforms shifted priorities or emphasized paid over organic, you could see the immediate hit to a brand like Vice, and then it ended up pretty much failing, I guess, in some ways. So it's a question of like over-reliance, especially on the business side, on these third parties to kind of generate revenue for you. I think that's been the fatal flaw, not the fundamental premise of social media, which is that they help take our content and give us new audiences, right? Which is pretty good. I mean, I remember being at the Wall Street Journal, and at that time, Snap was very new, and we created a kind of a channel. But the reality was that the 5 things we did on Snap to attract a younger audience were great. But after those 5 things, everything else was still the same old Wall Street Journal. So the bridge between bringing those people back to our revenue-generating platforms just didn't exist. So I think as experimentation goes, I think it's been great. The other thing to remember is that even as we all think about subscriptions and creating our own kind of revenue models, one of the great metrics of the success of retention and success is if you can get your subscriber to share, actually that's a real proven way to kind of show that they're engaged and they actually kind of stick with you. So there are great opportunities to leverage all these social media platforms. It's just that you can't trust them to drive your revenue and be your business partner.
I remember in my last job, we were waiting on tender hooks for TikTok to become monetizable. And I think like it's something that all news publishers do. We sit there and we push all this content onto all these different platforms in the hope that it will come back as monetizable. And I think that comes on to my question for you, Nart, is can we see any other radical changes in the future in this sphere?
Well, I mean, going back to the social media question as well, it's all related. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship between news organizations and social media. And I think it's sort of like a friend that you don't trust very much. You want to be friendly with them, but you always have to keep looking behind your back. It's like, what are they doing behind my back? And recently, what happened with the change of algorithms and instant articles being dumped and so on, affects all the news organizations. So that kind of a relationship is a love-hate relationship where you need to deal, and that's why I was saying in the beginning, I guess this was related to more this question, is that Now you can't sit and wait and see what is the next platform that's going to come out. As soon as it comes out, jump on it and see where it takes you, because you can't afford not to be a part of it. But in terms of what's next, who knows? And may God help us as well. With AR, VR, and ChatGPT, and I think ChatGPT, the AI came up with that name because it's a real weird name for it as well. So it's an interesting future that we're living in. We want to see where this goes. But I think what we're going to learn more and more is your owned and operated platforms are always going to be the center of everything. And if you think of it as this is the core where you create the content, and that's where you put all your content, and how you monetize that is going to be the most important thing. And then see where that takes you and how you divide your content on all these different platforms. So again, being with my background as a journalist, I think it's always going to be about the boots on the ground. It's always going to be about the journalists. You can admire any sort of technology, an AI-generated presenter that might come up on some sort of platform. It's who's in Ukraine, who's the one who's covering that earthquake, who's the person who's there, and we always will always admire and listen to people who put their lives on the line to cover the story, and nothing will ever replace that, those journalists on the boots on the ground. So if you tell me what's going to happen, I don't know. One thing I am sure of is that top journalism with people on the ground is always going to be there, no matter what platform that you're putting your content on.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting, and it's good because it makes me feel good about my
Good.
job. So when we're talking about future and radical change, you mentioned just now AI. We can't help but talk about AI. It's everywhere at the moment. It's in every conversation. I have it on my desktop every day, trying to grapple with it and make sure I'm in the game. Anthony, do you think it's got a future in helping us connect?
So 45 minutes before we get I get the first AI question.
Yeah,
That's actually really good. And so thanks for that, Enas. I'm obviously very excited, and I love talking about AI. For us, at Google, it's the most profound technology we're working on at the moment, clearly. And we really believe that it can have a meaningful and positive changes on people and on societies. I was actually very pleased to see in Joe's survey that actually most people in this room were mostly positive about about
in the
AI.
middle.
But there might be a bit more work to do, but it's a good starting point. I'm very, very optimistic about it. So your two question about connecting. So first of all, I think technology has helped us connect better and more clearly. I mean, I don't think we would have gone through the pandemic period without video, in the same way, without video conferencing. And as a French person living in the UAE, I connect all the time with my family and my friends back in France. So it's always been that. Now, I think what AI is going to bring is a lot more engaging experience, a lot more immersive experience, probably more personalized as well. And that's what we're going to see as the technology evolves. So we are working on that at Google. I could go through multiple innovations that we've announced, some of them announced last week, that will help increase knowledge and information, deliver better experiences through new search generative experiences. There's a lot of improvement on maps, for instance, where it's more immersive, the way you're going to connect and consume the information. But in terms of connection, if you've not seen it, there's an amazing project called Starline, where it's you've seen that. So it's a video conferencing. It has multiple cameras, and it's actually using AI to create an image that has a lot more depth, and you really feel you're with the person. Now, it's not the same as being on stage together as the person, but it's getting close to it, and I think it's going to bring us closer together, and back to the question of connection, definitely will improve that.
Yeah, and I know we are going to be running out of time soon, so I'm going to move on to a question which is kind of on the back of that. I think all of us in the industry are always looking towards the future and just making sure that we're ahead of the game slightly, as I mentioned. But what would you do personally to future-proof your career? Raju, I'll come to you first.
No, I think we should give this to Anthony, because that'll be 2 questions to Google.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, future-proof the career. I think so it's an interesting question, because I think what's behind is is my job safe, and what's going to happen with AI, which is definitely, in most of the AI conversation that I have actually, is the elephant in the room, what's going to happen. So we don't have so much time, but yes, some jobs are going to be lost. Like in the same way, like in the past, the lamplighters in the streets were replaced by bulbs and electricity. Okay, so that's one thing. There's going to be a lot of new jobs being created. I don't think any one of us had ever heard about prompt engineers a year ago. Now it's a big thing. So new jobs and probably others we can't even think of. I think the most important thing is how it's, for most of us, it's how it's going to change our job, like today and in the future. Not replace, but I use some of our AI-powered tools already, like included in our workspace, so it's like in Gmail and in Docs and everything. It helps me summarize some of the notes I have. It helps me start emails. It does not replace me, and I don't take that as like just asking Bard or our tools to actually do something and I just send it. But it saves a lot of time and helps me like really focus on where I can bring more value, which is not probably like writing an email or things like that. Now, so what is important and how I think about it is I need to understand AI. Not in the technical way, obviously, but AI in the practical way. What is it, how is it going to help me do my job better? And always keep up to date. And I think we need, in this world, to stay curious, to keep learning, and really like embrace the change in order for us to stay relevant in the future.
I like that. I'll come to Nart then.
Well, I think I'm very interested in how things develop right from the beginning. So I'll just give a small example. So the prompter operator in old TV stations used to hold the placard with the things written on it, and they would throw it and put another one out. And then they came up with a screen where you have someone sitting in a studio somewhere turning it around and you can read it.
That was my first job.
And then they said, oh, we have to cut costs. How are we going to do this? So they came up with something like a gas pedal, where the anchor himself or herself would sit there and do it. Now, with AI, there is the technology that it'll recognize the anchor, it'll recognize the speed, it'll recognize how they talk, what sort of questions that they would put together, and everything will be done for them. So the anchor will stand in front of a camera, and AI will help them with the prompter that's in front of them. Now, you can say that this is going to remove a lot of other jobs that were in the background, but ultimately it'll save a lot of other jobs as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of these things coming in technology when it comes to broadcasters and well, no longer broadcasters, media organizations. Some of it is going to be good, some of it is going to be very challenging, but it's a change in mindset that we have to accept, and change is coming. So there's no two ways about it.
Yeah, very good. Scary, but good. And Raju, how would you future-proof your career?
Why don't I talk about future-proofing our business, right? The news business.
Yeah.
I think more relevant than my own career here. I think two things. One is we've got to start doing some things, and we've got to stop doing some things. Our industry is terrible at stopping doing things. We launch a bunch of things and keep them for way too long. We should be sunsetting. We should be killing a lot of things, experimenting, and then stopping them. But what we should be starting to do now, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that 2023, I think, marks the beginning of the end of the web page as we have thought of it for the last 20 years. The reason I say that is, whether we agree what ChatGPT and or generative AI, why use a specific brand, whether it's in Bard or whether it's in Bing or anywhere else, is fundamentally going to change what happens with search. And most of us in the news business, or including at McKinsey, still depend on Google search primarily, but other search to bring 30, 40, 50% of our audiences back to us. My assumption is that as search and generative AI in search gets better and better, there will be a lot of answers provided to people looking for things that are much more self-contained. So we're going to move from a link set-based results to a much more citation-based results. And what that means is that the propensity for people to come from that result to back to our web pages is going to diminish. It will not fall off, but it will diminish. But even if they come to us, I think the expectations are dramatically going to change, where the old days of coming to a web page on a news site and having an article, a bunch of flashing things and sign up newsletters and all that is not going to be what people would expect from us. So we have to fundamentally start thinking today about like, what is the experience we will give when somebody actually comes? Few people are going to come. Those who come will have higher expectations. So one of the ways to rethink that is to say that if they're expecting, so let's say somebody searches for what is generative AI on Google. Right now, Google surfaces a bunch of things. By the way, search for that, and you will see McKinsey's result as the #1. And I'm not making this up. Search for it. What is generative AI is the question. I think they will expect when they come to a national or me or the Wall Street Journal for the results to be a lot more smarter than saying read a 2,000-word article. And so we need to start thinking about in terms of summaries, more dynamic kind of answers, maybe having some embedded intelligence where we actually have our own chatbot that says, okay, if you didn't find the summary here, here is the way for you to search our own chatbot to get the results. I think web pages are going to become much more audio and video centric rather than text centric. And all of those we have to start doing now, because if we wait for generative AI to kind of really change search and all of that, we will find ourselves significantly behind. And our industry is really good at waiting too long. There's little reason why we don't come up with a lot of these technologies ourselves, right? I mean, it's a healthy industry. And I want to end by saying that Orville Wright did not have a pilot's license when he came up with the airplane, right? So our industry shouldn't be waiting for other people to come up with technologies that play with content and then try to follow them. Sure, we don't have the level of investment that a big tech company has, but I think we're not doing a good job getting ahead of this ourselves. But the web page is ending. I'm sorry, I'm making a bet in front of everybody.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open now up to questions. I think we have a little tiny amount of time left. Has anybody got any questions? Can you get the microphone there?
I'm curious to ask that in today's world, government intervention or government setting policy is now the new norm. So how do you guys think that you're going to operate in that world? Is it that you're going to have to accept it and go with it?
Is your question to somebody?
Anybody?
Does anyone
So
want
I will start because, I mean, I'll start and I'll zoom on AI. Sundar, our CEO, has said it multiple times, and for actually now quite a long time. Like, AI is too important not to be regulated and too important to not be regulated well. So we need to have that conversation with governments to bring the right regulation. Now, it needs to be done in a way that balances the risk with the positive impact of the technology. And that's the conversation that we're starting having with governments. And some governments are more advanced than others. Having a Minister of AI helps having an understanding of the situation. But this is the conversation we want to have with government, and we'll operate like, I mean, actually, in any jurisdiction, we're operating like according to the law and regulation. But I think in this case, it's very, very important that we build a regulation together so that we get the right balance between the risk and the benefits of technology. You don't want to restrain the positive impact from AI, but you obviously have to manage a lot of the risk that we discussed or we could discuss.
When it comes to the web, my biggest fear with regulation is that it's happening country by country, and it's fundamentally changing the premise, and I think Google and the news industry actually believes in, which is this idea that there should be a worldwide open web. And that is getting affected by countries saying that if you don't do it this way, we will restrict access and we will do all sorts of things. And I think that is fundamentally not great for the world and for societies, because it's only around 2018 that 50% of the world's population got on the web on a daily basis. It's probably around 60, 65%. There are still a couple of billion people out there who need to be on the web on a regular basis for various reasons are not there, but they're coming on. So if we end up splintering the internet, which we thought is the one level playing field, and each country decides to have its own regulation, I don't think that's good for humanity.
Interesting big topics. Probably one more question time. think we're actually out of time, so that's actually coming at a good moment.
Good time.
Thank you so much to my panel. Please, I hope everyone gives a big clap to Raju, Nart, and Anthony for joining me.